In this video, we're going to do the basic configuration of a switch. So let's get started here. So initially, when you are configuring a switch, just like a router, when it comes out of the box, it is just a piece of metal. We're going to take the same laptop that we used to connect to the router and configure it in our last video, and we're now going to connect to the switch. Just letting you know that Packet Tracer allows you to literally click on the router itself or on the switch itself if you want to gain access to it quickly, but you need to understand that initially we're going to have to go in with a console cable to give this device its configuration. So I went and pulled a blue console cable. I'm going to connect to RS-232, but this time I'm going to connect it to the switch. And at the very top, I'm connecting to the console port. I am not connecting to one of the local area network ports. This would be a network connection. I'm connecting to the console port, which is an out-of-band connection. You're not really using the bandwidth of the device. This device, again, cannot ping through this connection to the switch. This device is just used to gain access to the switch. So I put some paper labs over in Blackboard for all of the modules, and I just want to pull up one of them. This is one of the paper labs, and basically this is describing the same connection. You have your laptop, and in the back you have your serial COM port, and this is saying that most computers don't have the serial COM port anymore, but if you do, you have the serial COM port with the DB9 connection that allows you to then plug into the console port at the back of the switch. This is the power cord at the back of the switch. There is no off and on button. So in order to power up a switch, you have to plug it in. To take the power out, you just have to unplug it. But again, this is the same connection that we're seeing here on Packet Tracer, just the console connection. And I just wanted to take you to one other place so that we can actually see what a physical switch actually looks like. We can actually do this on Packet Tracer. So let me just look at the switch. If we click on the switch on Packet Tracer, again, it brings us straight to the command line. This is where we're going to get when we actually go through the laptop connection. So let me just show you that really quickly so that we're not confused here. All I did is click directly on the switch and it will bring me into the command line. But what this laptop with the console connection is trying to simulate is what you would do in the real world. So in the real world, you would have this console connection into the back of the console port of the switch. You would click on your switch. You would open up your terminal emulation program such as PuTTY or TerraTerm. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on terminal. This is how we would be doing it in the real classroom with hyperterminal, TerraTerm, PuTTY, whatever we're using. So we would just click OK, and we're connecting through this light blue cable, not a network connection. We cannot ping through it. So this, again, is the same switch. We're actually consoled into the switch. I was doing something, so I'm in interface mode. So I'm just going to do a Control Z and an exit or an end or a log out to get out. So, but I'm still here at the switch. Okay, so this is the laptop connection, but again, if you click directly on the switch on Packet Tracer, it's still going to give you this command line connection. So let's see what Packet Tracer shows you as far as what the switch physically looks like. And this is a great representation. So this is what your switch looks like. These are the ports. These are the ports in the switch that you would connect your PCs into. So when we're talking about the PC connecting up to the switch, you have a PC and the NIC card. You're going to put the cable in the NIC card of the switch of the PC, and then you're going to plug it into a port on the switch. That's what you see represented up here. Okay. We can't get to the back of the switch with this view, so I'm going to actually take you to a different view, but this is on Packet Tracer. So we're just going to go back to the command line, and I'm going to minimize that. All right, so I'm going to take you to another file that I have. This file is an executable file, a file that I got from Cisco probably 20 years ago. It will give you a warning, so if you don't want to open these files on your machine, don't. We will be looking at a couple of them as we're going through the class, but not all of them. So what I like about this is that you can see the front view of the switch. This is what the switch looks like in the front. You can see this is a router, the 2621 router. So this is what a real device would look like. And I just wanted to show you what the console port would look like on the router. So if I just maximize this, this is the router, and I can now pull it around and move it around. So if we look at this, router, it has a console port. This is where we would plug in that blue cable from the laptop so that we could configure the console port of the router. So it's the same thing with the switch. We would just plug into the console port on the switch with that blue cable. Now here's where things differ. Now notice the router has these Ethernet ports, but there are only 2 of them. All right, on the switch, we had all of those ports that we could connect to, those fast Ethernet ports. This on the router is where the switch connects to the router. So if we exit here, and I just wanted to show you a little bit more functionality before we exit. If you hit this, let me just make it a little bit smaller. And if you hit this I button down here, it has descriptions of all of the ports. So if we click on one of these ports that I say the switch plugs into, it's going to tell you that that's a fast Ethernet port used to provide connectivity between 10 base or 100 base Ethernet LAN. So this port can operate up to 100 million bits per second. And the same thing with this port right here. They're both Ethernet ports. So this router has 2 Ethernet ports on it. In this case, they're fast Ethernet ports. So let's go back to the topology and take a look at it. Power button over here, turn off and on over here. And then these ports on the top of the router are the serial ports. So these ports, this is the high-speed serial interface port. You can check the information on that. And then this is a V35. This is an older serial connection. But let's go back to the picture on Packet Tracer. Again, what we're looking at is the router connecting from one of its LAN ports as opposed to its wide area network ports up here, the serial ports. The LAN port is going to connect directly to the switch. So let's look at that in Packet Tracer. So when we're looking at Packet Tracer, what we're looking at is this connection right here. All right, so the router's gigabit port, the LAN port, is connecting to the switch, and then the switch has all of these connections to the other devices. So again, we're going to go in and we're going to configure the basic settings on the switch. So again, we're coming through the laptop, so we've got to come through the terminal connection. So click on the terminal connection, click on OK, and now we're connected into the command line of the switch. All right, so there are a couple of things that I want to configure on the switch, so let me just pull that to the side. I went ahead and I created a Word document that is a checklist of the basic configuration that I'm going to want to do on the switch. So I'm going to want to give it a name. I'm going to want to give the whole switch an IP address. With the switches, a layer 2 switch, we give the entire switch one IP address so that we can remotely connect to it if we need to. And we need to bring that interface up. It's called the switch virtual interface when we give an IP address to the whole switch. Then we have to configure passwords. Remember, right here, we're plugging into the console port of either the router or the switch, in this case, the switch. Well, we want to put a password on that so that whoever plugs into that port is going to prompt them for their password information. line VTY040015 password, this is for when we're remoting into the device, and that's why it needs an IP address so that we can remote into it. The switch by itself, a layer 2 switch, does not need an IP address. It will still allow traffic to flow through it from PC to PC or PC up to router without an IP address. But with an IP address, we can manage it from remote locations. So we want to put a password on the remote connection. So that's what the line VTY04 if you're on a router, or line VTY015 if you're on a switch. And I'll show you how you can determine whether you're going to be configuring just 0 through 4 or 0 through 15. And then the enable secret is what lets us move to a mode in the router where we can configure anything. So the enable has actually 2 passwords that you can configure. You can configure the enable password and then give it a password. The password is going to show up in plain text in that case, or you can configure an enable secret and then put the password. In that case, the password will be encrypted. So you can do the enable secret or the enable password, but you just need to understand the enable secret is encrypted, so it's better than the enable password. So if you do both of them, the router is just going to disregard your enable password and the password. It's only going to use the enable secret password. All right, we're going to configure a banner message of the day, which is a message that is telling people to stay out of our device. It's not an invitation in. It's telling people that if you don't have the authentication to come into this device, please leave right now before I have to file federal charges. All right, the description is a description that you want to put on an interface. We can put a description on this particular switch saying which network it's on or something of that nature. You might want to put the name of the authority that might be, or the person that might be closest to the switch in the event that there's an issue and you need them to unplug something and plug something back up. You might, whatever information is useful to you. So this is what we're going to be configuring on the router, and we're going to do some of what I call housekeeping commands. Now, I just call them housekeeping commands. So if you talk to anybody and you say, yeah, she had us do these housekeeping commands, and they really made it a lot easier to configure the router, they're not going to know what you're talking about. So these 3 commands are very, very helpful. If you've been playing around with Packet Tracer, you may have come up against some of these issues, and these 3 commands will make your life easier when you're learning how to configure Packet Tracer. The first one is the no IP domain lookup, and we'll be doing this as we're going through the presentation. I cut typing when I was in high school. There's no shame in my game. I just can't type. So when I type something in, sometimes I fat finger the letters, and when you do that on the command line, sometimes it's trying to translate what you're doing because it can't recognize the command, and it will literally hold you up for like 50 seconds. So you can do a Control-Shift-6 to get out of it, but what you want to do is actually configure this command in global configuration mode, and this will stop it from trying to translate. If you spell something wrong that it doesn't understand, it'll just give you the command prompt on the next line, and then you can keep it moving. Because typically when you type something wrong, it's like you already typed it and hit enter. It's like, oh, I just typed that wrong. So you know right away. So just retype it the correct way. This command, exec timeout, we're going to use this on the console line, and we can use it on the virtual terminal lines. Remember, the console line is when somebody's consoled into your device. So what we're going to say on that line is, I don't want this device to time out. No minutes, no seconds. That's what the 0 and the 0 is. When you're actually working on a lab, let's say for homework, you might need to refer to your notes in order to figure out what a command is. And the thing is when you're idle on the router or the switch for a period of time, it's going to lock you out, and then you're going to have to come back in with your passwords if you have them, which is very inconvenient if you're constantly looking up things. So what we want to do is to configure this command on our line con 0. so that whatever page we're on, while we're researching whatever we're researching, it will leave us on that page and it won't kick us out. The other thing that is very, very helpful is when you're typing a command into Packet Tracer, you could be doing your typing and then let's say a message comes up. Let's say an interface goes up or an interface goes down. A message is going to cut right in the middle of what you're typing to just say whatever it says. Interface gigabit 00 just went down. All right. If you just continue typing from where you left off, the command line knows what you're typing versus that console message that just broke up your line. All right, so you can keep typing and just hit enter. It's just a little confusing when that happens. So what you can do on your line con 0, you can also do this on your line VTY to give a courtesy to the person who is telnetting or SSHing in, so the same thing will apply to them. If you apply this command under line con 0, now whenever a console message needs to show up on your console, it will allow you to continue typing and hit enter first before it sends that message to the console. So we're going to be doing these things in this packet tracer. All right, so I'm going to grab all of this that I put here, and I'm actually going to put it on the packet tracer topology. So I grabbed it. I'm going to do a Control C, and then I'm going to minimize it. Then I'm going to take one of these notepads again, and I'm going to put it on the topology, and then I'm going to do a Control V. So now there is my checklist. It doesn't look as big when you let go, but these are the things that I want to do on my switch. I'm going to click on my laptop. Oops, let me get rid of the comments. I'm going to click on my laptop, and now this is my connection to the switch. This is how I'm going to give my switch a host name. So I'm going to just click out in this area to move this note over here so it's kind of out of the way. Then I'm going to click back on the laptop, and I'm going to bring the prompt up here. So now this mode right here, this is user mode. This is a look and see mode. This mode you really can't do a lot. If you do a question mark at this mode, this will show you these are all the things that you can do. Connect, disable, disconnect. You can do enable, which we are going to do to get to the next mode, which is privilege mode. You can ping from this mode. You can exit the device or log out from the device. That both of them will take you out of the device. You can do your show commands here, but typically we're not going to be in this mode at all. We're just going to transition out of this mode. So again, we're at switch. We're going to type the word enable, because what we want to be able to do is to get into privilege mode. Once we can get to this mode with the pound sign, we can configure anything. So I think you would agree that we would want to put a password between user mode and privilege mode. If you look on our checklist, that is that enable secret or the enable password that we're going to be configuring to communicate between those two modes. All right, let me describe one thing before we go any further. When you first get into the switch, you're either going to come in through the console line, or you're going to be remoting in. So you're going to be somewhere out in the world. You're going to get you're going to come to this router. You're going to say telnet to this address, and then that will bring you to the switch. So that would be telnetting in, and this is consoling in. All right, those are the two ways that you can access your device. So just to restate that one more time, when you're initially getting into your router or your switch, you're either coming through the console port, in which case you're going to use the line con 0 password, or you're remoting in through the VTY lines, so you will use whatever password for the VTY lines if you're telnetting in. All right, now that is just getting you to the user mode. So either coming through the console or SSHing in or telnetting in, it's only getting you to this mode right here. So these two passwords that we're configuring here, the line con password and the line VTY password are for your initial entry into the router or switch. Now, once you get into the router or switch, as we said, we need to get to this mode, which is the privilege mode, which is where you can do anything. All right, so in this mode, we type the word enable. I didn't type out the whole word. Let me go back to user mode. So I'm in privilege mode right now because I typed enable. I'm going to go back to user mode, which we typically are not going to do. We really don't do very much in user mode, but you need to know how to get back to it in the event that you need to. Disable will not take you out of the device, but it will bring you back to user mode. So in this mode, I'm typing enable. Enable me to get to privilege mode, which is this mode that I can now type config T. Config T is configure from the terminal. I typed enough letters for the router, the switch, to know what I'm trying to do. So I'm just going to hit the tab button and tab out the whole command. So what I'm telling my switch is I want to configure you from the terminal. So from whichever terminal I'm using, in this case the laptop, to connect to the switch, I'm telling you I want to configure you from here. All right, so when you hit enter, it now brings you into global configuration mode. This is the mode that you can do anything. So these are the modes of the router. We've got to do some passwords now so you can understand how the passwords impact the, the switch. All of these commands, I've been using switch and router interchangeably. All of these commands that we've been doing so far apply both to the router and the switch. So what I'm telling you here for the switch is true for the router. The only thing that's going to be different for the router is giving it an IP address. Everything else that we're going to be doing here is going to be exactly the same for both devices. So the first thing we want to do is we want to name our device. We want to name our switch. We're going to do the host name. That was the first thing on our list, but it didn't need to be the first thing that we do. All of the things that we're doing from our checklist, we can do them in any order. It doesn't matter which one we do first, as long as we do all of them. Okay, so I'm going to change the host name to my name and hit enter. So now the prompt changed from switch or router, that would be the default name of the router, to Alexis. So we've handled the first one on our list. So under the host name, I'm going to put an X here because we did the host name. So now I want to do the passwords first, actually, before we go into the IP address and bring the interface up. I want to do the passwords for entering into our device. Now remember, we're consoled in, but we're also going to configure the password for the VTY lines in the event that somebody needs to telnet in at another time. So again, now we're going to configure the line VTY. So basically, I just have to tell the switch what I want to configure. So I'm going to say line, I'm going to do line con 0 first, and then we'll do line VTY. And then what I'm going to say is when somebody tries to access this console port that I'm connected into here, I want them to use the password of Cisco. And in this class, when we're doing the labs, unless the lab specifically tells you to do a different password, the only passwords we're going to use are Cisco and class, because then if you send me a packet tracer and you put another password on it, then how am I getting into your packet tracer if I don't know that you put Bob as the password? Okay, so we're using Cisco or class, all lowercase, unless the specific lab tells you to do a different password, in which case you must use that password or packet tracer won't recognize the password. All right, so LineCon 0, password Cisco, but this command by itself is not going to do anything. Password Cisco is not doing anything at all. We've got to tell it when we wanted to use it. So at login, so we hit enter. So when somebody is logging in to my console port, I want them to use the password of Cisco. So this is what we just did. Let's test it. Let's exit out of our device. So I'm going to do a Control Z. And then you can type exit or end, and this will literally take us out. This is not going to take us back to the user mode. disable brought us back to the user mode. This is going to take us out of the switch. All right, now you might be saying, well, wait a minute, if you take me out, I'm going to lose all my stuff. No, everything you're typing here is in RAM. So when you hit enter, it'll execute it. But the problem is if my power does get disconnected on the switch, yep, I'm going to lose everything. So you need to do a copy run start, but exiting out of the console is not going to erase your device. All right, so we're just exiting out of the console. So it's kind of like we're coming back in anew. So we're going to hit return, and notice now it's prompting me for a password because I set that up on the console and I'm consoling in with my laptop. So the password I set up was Cisco. And when you type the password in, the prompt is not going to move. You just have to type the words in and then hit enter. So now it brought me to user mode. At user mode, I'm going to type in enable, and let me spell the whole thing out. And then that brings me to privilege mode. And remember, we said we want to have a password between these modes, because if somebody just walked into your wiring closet with their laptop and they plugged directly into your device, you might want to have a password on that console port as well as a password between these two modes, your user mode and your enable secret. All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to configure a password between these two modes. Again, to configure anything, you're going to do config terminal, and then we're going to set the password. And I'm going to do both the enable password and the enable secret, and then we're going to look at the difference. So enable password, let's say Cisco, or class rather. I'm not going to make it Cisco 1 because we're not going to be using this one. And then I'm going to do enable secret class. So it's this password that's going to be used because the enable password is in plain text. And I'll show you in a minute when I do a running configuration to see everything I've configured on my device. I'm going to see that written out just like that. But the enable secret class is going to be encrypted. So because the enable secret is a more powerful password, the router or switch is just going to ignore the enable password completely. So you don't need to do both of them. If you just did the enable password, that's what it would use. But if you do both of them, it's just going to ignore the enable password. So let's see what happens now when we go out of the machine again. So let's do a Control Z and let's exit. All right, that takes us out of our device. Now this is asking for the console password because we're consoling in. So this is the initial password to gain access to the device. So I'm going to put in Cisco because our line con password was Cisco. Okay. And now I'm at user mode. So now I type that enable again, and before it would bring me straight to privilege mode. Now it's asking me for a password. So the password that it's asking me for, again, in this case, because I configured both the enable secret and the enable password, it's the enable secret that it's looking for. So I'm going to type in class. Once I type in class, now I'm in the device. I can configure anything. So I'm going to do config T, and you must do a config T to configure from your terminal, and then you can do your configuration. Okay, so that's how you would configure the passwords. Let me say one other thing about these passwords. Let's go out of the device again. All right, I'm going to exit so I can actually get out of the device, and then we're going to come back in. So now when we are coming back in, I like to give a little analogy about getting into the router. In that user mode is kind of like a look and see mode. So when we type Cisco here for the line con password, this lets us into user mode. We can see a few things, but we can't see everything. We can't change anything in this mode. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to now proceed to try to get into privilege mode. So we type enable, and now again it's asking us for the password. We're going to put in class, and we're into our device. All right, so if you have any friends who live in a building and they have to buzz you in at the bottom of the building, this is the analogy I'm going to use for these two different modes. So user mode is you walking up to the building, you pressing the button for their name or the number of their apartment, and them coming on the speaker, verifying that it's you, and then they buzz that front door to let you in that initial front door. That's what user mode is. In user mode, you can see some things, but not everything about a router. When you're in that person's apartment building, you can walk through where the mailboxes are, you can get to the elevator or the stairs. So you can move around a little bit, but you can't do everything. You can't get into your friend's apartment, okay? But you can walk around the hallways. So that's what this user mode is. You're walking around the hallways in the router or the switch, but you really can't do much. When you type enable, though, that now is going to allow you to get into the apartment. So this is, enable is the key. That's the password that's going to get you into the apartment. And now you can hang out with your friends, or you can do your configurations now on your switch or your router. So you really need to understand the distinction about the passwords that you're configuring. Line con is going to give you access to this mode right here, user mode, and line VTY password is also going to give you access just to the user mode. Once you type enable, you have to put the enable secret or the enable password here to then allow you to get into privilege mode. So again, once we get to privilege mode, we can type config T, and that will bring us to global configuration mode, where we can configure some things on this device. So we already did the host name. We already did the line con password and the line VTY password. So let's put a little X there. We did the line con password. We did the line VTY password. And we also did the enable secret, right? Now we're going to do a banner. So we're going to put a message on this switch letting people know that if they don't have access, they should not be getting into the device. So at this point, I did give this device a little bit of configuration. I gave the device a name. I gave it some passwords. Let's take a look at what we've done. We're in global configuration mode, so this is not where we do the show commands. Show commands are done in this mode. And in order to get back to this mode, the hashtag mode, no matter where you are, at your prompt, just do a Control Z as in zebra and then hit your enter button. That will bring you back to the privilege mode. So I'm going to do a command that you should be doing every time you configure your device. You want to go back and just check and make sure you didn't fat finger anything. So you're going to do a show run. The command is show running -config. But you can abbreviate it as a show run. So I'm always going to do the abbreviation, and I'll try to remember to tab out the full command so that you can see it. All right, so I'm going to hit enter. And this is showing me that it is building the configuration, and this is how big the file is. This is not in memory, though. This is in RAM. All right, if you saved your configuration and did a show start, it would show you how much memory that startup configuration is. But this is not memory. This is just a file of everything running on your device currently. So when you execute your show run command up here, what you're seeing, you have the host name configured. So verify that that's correct. Let me just pull this out so it looks a little bit neater for us to look at. you have your enable secret, and notice that class, this is what class looks like now. It's encrypted, but notice that the enable password is still in plain text. That's why when you are trying to go from user mode to privilege mode, it's going to just disregard the enable password because it's not as secure as the enable secret. Now at the bottom of this page, we see the more. That means it has more to display. If I hit enter, it's only going to go down one line at a time. But if I hit my space bar a couple of times, it'll go all the way to the bottom. So typically when I execute my show run command, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a show run, tab it out. You don't have to tab it out. I'm going to hit enter to get the first page. Then I'm going to automatically tab down to the bottom. And then I can just use my scroll bar to push up and down through this configuration. So as we saw here, we did the host name, the enable secret, and the enable password. If I keep going down now, this is the whole file. It shows me that I did my line con password Cisco at login. All right, but notice that it also shows me that my line VTY04 has no password on it. So the VTY lines for people to telnet or remote in are not configured yet. But notice on the switch, we have 0 through 4 and 5 through 15. I can configure all of those lines at the same time. So I'm just going to put my cursor, click here, and then do a Control Z. That will give me the command line, and now I want to try to configure these VTY lines. So config T. So I'm going to configure it the same way I did my line con 0. Line VTY, but now I'm going to do 0 through 15. So I'm actually capturing all of these lines at the same time with this one command. So you don't have to do them separately. All right, so I'm going to hit enter. Then I'm going to do my password Cisco, because that's what we're using in this class, but in the real world you would have a different password. And then again, we're going to do at login. So we're saying if somebody tries to remotely access our device through the VTY lines coming through the router, then we want them to use this password. So this is going to be the prompt that shows up to get you to user mode, that greater than sign. All right, so we've configured those things. Now we're going to do a banner. Okay, so right now we're in line mode. In line mode, I'm not going to configure a banner. I need to be back at global configuration mode, which is this mode right here. So I'm just going to hit exit. If I hit Control Z, it's going to bring me all the way back here, and then I have to come back in with config T in order to get back to this mode. So since I'm in config line mode, all I have to do is hit exit to bring me back to global configuration mode. So exit will back you out. We were in global configuration mode when we typed that we wanted to configure line VTY015. It then put us in line mode. Now we're exiting out of line mode back to global configuration mode. All right, so now this is where we do our banner. So again, the banner is going to be a message that tells people if you're not authorized, stay out of the device. So banner, and then MOTD, which is message of the day. And then you can use any character above the numbers on your keypad. I'm going to use the $sign. And this message should say something like, if you're not authorized to access this device, please exit now or you will be prosecuted. Okay, I'm going to shorten that out. And then I have to use the same value that I used to start my message. I have to use the same character to end my message, and I cannot use that character within my message. So this is my message. I'm gonna backspace because that looks kind of like pitiful based on what I said. I just want to make it look a little bit longer maybe. So I'm going to use my back arrow and go back in here, and then just put a few fancy things in here so it kind of looks a little bit better than just get out. Okay, so now I'm going to hit enter. So now let's go look and take a look at it. Now we have to get out of the device. How do we get out of the device? How do we log out of this device? So we're going to do a Control Z, and then we're going to exit or log out. Okay, so now we're out. Now I'm going to hit enter. So this is now us again initially consoling into our switch or our router. Okay, so we have this console. We're getting connected again. So now I'm going to hit enter. All right, look, there's my message right there. It shows up right there. So you would have an expansive message. I'm just not going to do all that typing. All right, and then it's asking us for our password. Again, we're consoling in, so whatever password we put under line con password is what it's going to ask us for. So Cisco. All right, and then enable, it's going to ask us for the enable secret password, which was class. So I'm going to type that. Okay, so now we've got a couple of things done. We've got the banner message of the day done. So let me click on that just to indicate that we did it. And these are some commands that actually, these housekeeping commands, again, this is just what I call them. If you ever were talking to somebody in networking and you say, yeah, she had us do these housekeeping commands, they're going to look at you like you're crazy. So this is just my terminology for these commands that will make your life easier as you're learning how to configure your devices. So let's take a look at what these three things will do. So on your switch or your router, again, all of these apply to your switch or your router. We're in our device right now. And let me go back to user mode. How did we say we go back to user mode if we're in privilege mode? Disable, yes. All right, so we're going back to user mode. Now in user mode, we're supposed to type the word enable. So let's say that I fat fingered it and I did EBA. So now or ABA, now I hit enter, it's translating that because I didn't type in a command that it recognizes. Literally, I can keep hitting enter, which you hear me doing, and it's not going to do anything. It's going to hold me up for about a whole minute trying to translate ABA. Now I can manually break this by doing a Control-Shift-6, but what I really want to do is just to configure this command, no IP domain lookup. And look, I'm going to copy it from here. Control-C, all right, and then I'm going to go back to my switch. All right, so it was trying to do that lookup process. It couldn't figure out what I was trying to do. So then it eventually, after about a minute, brought me back to the command prompt. So if I hit enter, now I'm back at the command prompt. Now I'm going to type in enable, E-N-A. And now it brings me to, it's trying to let me get to privilege mode by typing in the enable secret or the enable password, which is class. All right, so now at this mode, I want to configure that no IP domain lookup, but to configure anything, you've got to do config T, right? So now I'm going to actually just paste that command in. I copied it from that file over there, and I'm just going to right click and paste it in. So no IP domain dash lookup. You can paste it in, you can type it in, and I'm going to hit enter to execute it. So now let's do the same scenario again. Let's exit out, Control Z, exit. And okay, now I got to come in with all my passwords. Cisco, enable, class. Oh, excuse me. I wanted to do that wrong. So let me do a Control Z. Let me just put a bogus password in. Okay, so now I'm back at user mode. Now I'm going to type that ABA again, and I hit enter. Now it's not going to hold me up for a minute. It brought me back to the command prompt. So that was the command no IP domain dash lookup. That's what that does, and we did that in global configuration mode. So no IP domain lookup, we just did enable, we did class for my password, we did config T, and then we executed the no IP domain lookup. Now these two commands are done on the VTY lines, and we could also do them on the line console. Well, they're both for the line console, and we can apply them to the VTY lines again. Remember, the exec timeout says if you're idle, just leave me on my page if you have 0 minutes and 0 seconds. And the logging synchronous stops the device from breaking in while you're typing. So we want to put those on the lines So we're going to do line con 0. Notice that we already went into the line. We already gave the line a password. But if you want to add something or subtract something, just go back to the line and add it, or go back to the line and subtract it. You don't have to redo everything that's already been done. Just add or subtract. Subtracting would be, in most cases, just putting a no in front of the command that you use to put in. So in this case, if I want to add the exec timeout, I'm going to type this one, exec-timeout, and it's 0 minutes and 0 seconds. So I'm telling this device that I don't want it to time out at all. If I wanted to allow it to be idle for 10 minutes and 0 seconds, then this says, okay, if you're idle for 10 minutes, then I'm going to log you out. But when we're doing our packet tracer exercises, like for homework or doing a lab, we probably want it to be 0, 0, so it will just leave us on whatever screen we're on while we're doing our research. All right, so that's what we would do for exec timeout. And then we're going to go to line VTY, and we're going to do the same command over there. And what that says is that now when somebody's remotely accessing this device, don't let it time out. But for that scenario under line VTY, we're going to make the minutes. We're not going to do 0, 0 because somebody remotely in a different country could be accessing our device, and we're not really familiar with what their surrounding environment is. Are they in an environment where this device is secure and nobody can walk up to it? You really don't know that. So I don't want to leave it open where if this person gets a console connection and they walk away from their desk, that anybody could just walk up to it and play with my devices and change the configuration. So for your remote connections, I would probably make this an exec timeout of 5, 0, so 5 minutes. If they're idle, that it will log them out. All right, so now we're going to do the logging synchronous. Logging synchronous, I'm going to tab it out. So this command says when you're typing, if there's a console message that needs to be sent to my screen to tell me that something went up or down, wait until I'm finished typing and hit enter, and then send me the message. So these are your housekeeping commands. So we did all of them right now. We just have one more quick thing to do as far as configuration, and that is to give the switch an IP address and to bring the interface up and to give the interface a description. Now again, all of these things that we've done so far as the housekeeping commands, the banner, the enable secret, the line VTY, line con, host name, all of these are exactly the same on the router. The only distinction right now is how we're going to give the switch an address. We give the switch an overall IP address, but every port we connect off of the router, if there were 2 gigabit ports like we saw in the picture of the real router and 2 serial ports, this router is going to have 4 separate connections off of it. And each one of those connections is going to have its own address on its own network. But when we're talking about the switch is a layer, this switch is a layer 2 switch. It doesn't use IP addressing for anything as far as moving the traffic. We just give it an address so that we can remotely connect to it and configure it. So now we're going to go and we're going to give the switch its address. I'm just going to choose an address. We're in line mode now, so we need to go back to global configuration. So we're going to exit out. So interface VLAN 1 is the first way that we show you how to give the switch an address. Just take my word for it for right now until you know a little bit further. Don't change the number to anything else. Just leave it to interface VLAN 1. And then we would give it an address. You saw in the last video how we gave an address to the router. So this part is the same. The only thing that's different is we're not picking a physical interface on the switch as we would on the router to give it an address. We're just using this command to give the overall switch its IP address. So this command is the same on the router, IP address. And let's say we have these guys as 1, 100, 25, and 50. I'm going to give my router's address 192 because it has to have an address on this network, 168.10, and I'm going to make it .44. All right, and it's got to have the same mask as a /24. So 24 bits are represented as 255, 255, 255.0. So this is the whole command here to configure this switch with an IP address and a subnet mask. But remember, just like the router, when we go into a port on the router and say, hey, give it this IP address and subnet mask, we still need to bring that port up. We still need to bring this address up. This is called a switch virtual interface when we're giving the switch an IP address. So to bring this up, we do a no shut. All right, that will bring it up. It's telling us interface VLAN, change state to up. This is a console message. So when ports come up and down, as soon as they go up and down, the device wants to send that to the console right away. Logging synchronous, again, will allow you to finish your typing before the message shows up on the port. So the other thing that we did on the devices on this network, remember when we configured this, let me click out here and put my mouse over this PC. Notice that the PC has a default gateway address. We have the fast Ethernet address up at the top, which is the address of the PC. That's the address we would ping to. But down towards the middle, you see the gateway address. So just like the PCs need to know who is their default gateway, you also have to tell the switch who their default gateway is. So we, okay, I just clicked on the switch and that's why the screen is white. So I'm just gonna go back to my laptop connection because that's where I was doing everything else. But everything is still reflected whether we click on the switch or not, but let's just do it consistently. All right, so now I'm in interface mode. I need to exit out of interface mode. Okay. And I need to now give the switch its default gateway address. So on the switch, we don't have a little box that says, give me the IP address, give me the subnet mask, and give me the default gateway. On the PC, it was real easy to see what we could do to fill in by going to the IP config. It asks us right here for the default gateway. We don't have that same luxury on the switch, so we just have to remember to do it. IP default gateway, and we give it the address of the router. No subnet mask, just the 192.168.10.1. So whatever address this router's port is, that's going to be the address that you're setting as the default gateway of the switch, because if the switch was talking to somebody on a different network, it would have to send its traffic to this router's port at that address. All right, so we've configured it. We're just going to hit enter, and that's how you configure the default gateway on your device. Now, we didn't do the description. Let's go back into this interface VLAN 1 and give it a description. Now, notice we're back in global configuration mode. So from here, we can go anywhere. So we're going to tell it we want to go back into interface VLAN 1. So if you don't do something, just go back in and do it. To do a description, we simply do this, DESC. You can tab it out for the word description. This port connects to 192.168.10.0/24. Whoops. 192.168.10.0/24 network. Okay, and I'm going to hit enter. So that's just a description that I put on my device. Now that is everything that we said that we wanted to do. We set up an IP address on the switch, a switch virtual interface. We brought that interface up with the no shut command, and you do the same thing on the router, except we're doing these on the LAN and WAN ports on the router. We set a description. You would set the description on the router exactly the same way. So this is the basic configuration of your switch. Let's take a look at the whole thing now. And you should always do this. So Control Z will bring you here. You'll do a show run. and you hit enter, space bar to the bottom, and then just go to the top and make sure you have everything configured. So right here under, I'm going back down to the show run. I believe this is the last one that we executed. This is the host name, your enable secret, your enable password. Just verify what you can. Of course, you can't verify the encrypted stuff. You have the no IP domain lookup command configured so that if you misspell something, it won't hold you up for a whole minute. We have the IP address that we gave to the switch. So this is the overall address of the switch. And this is the description that we put on it. This port connects to the 1024 network. Whatever description is suitable for that port. If it was a link going to your service provider, you might want to put the circuit number, for example, so you don't have to go and look through your desk or notes to figure out what the circuit number is, and even the telephone number of your provider. Put that right here on the interface. So now if something goes down, you can like, hey, my network is down, is circuit number such and such. You got everything you need right here. And then we set up the default gateway. Remember, you have to have a default gateway or your device is not going to be able to talk to anybody outside of your LAN. Not having a default gateway is kind of like lockdown for us. We're in the house, but if we couldn't go out of our house, kind of like they're locking people, they're taping people in their houses, their default gateway is not available. So the default gateway is how you leave your local area, you leave your house to now go out and visit the rest of the world. If we don't do this for the switch or the end devices on the network, they will never be able to talk to anyone outside of their network. All right, I just wanted to show you one really quick thing now. Now that we set up all of the passwords, down here we set up the VTY passwords. So we should be able to remotely access this, this switch. So we should be able to remotely connect, and we could remotely connect if there was like an internet out here, if there was an internet out here and we had connectivity for the devices out there. A device from the internet can literally come to our router and ask to telnet into this device. We're going to be just telnetting from our local area network. So in order for our PC in this case to gain access to the switch, we're now going to remotely connect using the VTY lines. I'm going to get rid of this only so you can see that we are not connecting with this connection. All right, so I clicked in the white area, I'm clicking the X, I'm clicking this cable, so we're no longer connected. If we click on the laptop now, and we click through the terminal, and we click OK, we don't have anything because we're not connected anymore. This is the laptop we're looking at right here. We're not connected anymore. All right, so let me bring back up the packet tracer. And now we're going to remotely access the switch from our PC. All right, so we're going to click on our PC and we're going to click on the command prompt so that you can verify that this is where we're communicating from. Notice that we still have this connection up when we did the IP config, when we configured it in the last lab. And notice that it's telling us it's 192.168.10.100. But this output did not have its default gateway. So let's execute the command again to make sure that it does now. All right, so we're just going to do the IP config and just make sure that everything looks kosher. We're not trying to get to the default gateway right now, but had we done that, the line VTY with the passwords and the enable secret, we would then be able to get into our router as well through remotely accessing it. So we're on this PC now, command prompt, we're going to type in telnet. And we're going to telnet to the address of the switch, 192.168.10, and we gave it the address 44. So when we hit enter now, what it's asking us for is the line VTY password. In this case, it is still Cisco, but you've got to remember whatever password you configure there is what it's going to be prompting you for because you're telnetting in now. You're not consoling in. So Cisco, they just happen to be the same passwords. And now we're in the device, and now we're going to type enable to get to privilege mode. And that's where it's going to ask us for the enable secret, which is class. So now from our PC, we have access to our switch. We can make any configuration on the switch. We're coming through in-band connection. We're telnetting from our PC through this cable to the remote access port or the line VTYs on this device. So we configured all 16 of the lines 0 through 15 with the same password, and that's how we're accessing our device. One other command that I wanted to show you was how you were to encrypt passwords. So if I did a show run, again, we see that the enable password shows up in clear text. And if we go to the bottom, the VTY line show up in clear text and the line con 0 shows up in clear text. Well, if your boss comes to you and says, I don't want to really see the passwords, can you encrypt them? So what you would need to do, I'm just going to up arrow my config T. If I had typed it in this mode prior to shutting down, then I would still see the last 10 commands, but I shut down after I did config T. So now I have to type it again. Config. I'm very disappointed. All right, so now what we're going to do is, 1 second. We're going to encrypt these passwords, and this is the command that you would use to encrypt the passwords. Service, password, and I'm going to hit the tab. So this is the command, service password encryption. This says all of the passwords that we've already configured that are in plain text, I want to encrypt them now. All right, so I'm going to hit enter, and then we're going to execute another show run, and we should see that all of these passwords that we could see the words are no longer in plain text. So I'm going to do a Control Z and then a show run. I'm going to up arrow that command because I did do that since this router's been up again, and I'm going to hit show run. Now, if we go all the way, we can start right here. The enable password, it's encrypted now. You can't see Cisco 1. And if we go all the way to the bottom, the line con password is now encrypted. The line VTY2 passwords are now encrypted. And there are no other plain text passwords, so it did that. But the problem is now you gave your boss this output. I'm going to do a config T again. You gave your boss this output, and they're like, oh, wait a minute. So now if I need to get in, I'm going to have to go look in my file to figure out what the password is. Oh, no. Can you change it back so at least I can see, let me see, at least show me what the line con password is. So if I need it, I don't have to go find it. All right, so what we're going to have to do is to turn off service password encryption because it's turned on now. And what that means is that any password that is a plain text password will get encrypted. So I want to turn that off right now. So I'm going to put in the same command that I used to turn it on. And in order to turn it off, I'm going to go to the front of the line and do a no and a space. Now, I could use these arrow buttons to go back and forth on the line. You can use the arrow buttons, but I'm going to use a Control A as an alphabet. That's going to take me directly, my cursor directly to the front of the line. I'm going to type in my no and hit space, and then that's going to, I can hit my enter right here. You don't have to go to the end of the line to hit enter. This is my command. This is what I want. So I'm going to hit enter right now. But what this does now is it turns service password encryption off. If I want to now see the line con password unencrypted, I now have to reconfigure it. So I've got to go back into line con 0 and oops, wrong one. Told you I couldn't type. Back into line con 0, and then I'm going to say password Cisco. And I turned encryption off, so now if we do a show run, this one at least should show up in plain text. So I'm going to do a Control Z, and then I'm going to do a show run. And there you see it. So now Cisco is not encrypted, and if we do any other plain text passwords right now, they will not be encrypted either. Okay, so there are a couple of commands I just want to show you before we end. Of course, that show running configuration is a very important command to verify everything that you have configured on your device. But remember, you want to save it, because if somebody comes by and unplugs your power, you just lost everything. You got to do everything all over again. So copy. And this is done at the privilege mode, just like your show commands, just like your telnet. If we were going to ping from our switch, this is where we would do it. So we're going to do a copy running configuration, and I'll tab it out, space startup configuration. And you can simply do a copy run start, but you need to know what the whole command is. For example, you might get a question on the exam where it shows you the output and it says, is this what you would use? If they said starting configuration, that would be wrong because it's a startup. Show running, copy running configuration to start up configuration. So you need to know what the command says before you start getting fancy and start using the shortcuts, copy run start. You need to understand what the full command is first. All right, so I'm saying I want to copy what I have running on my device, and it's asking me right here, well, do you want to send it to the startup config? Whatever it has in brackets, if that is what you want to do, which it is, you just hit enter. So I'm just going to hit enter, and it will send it to the startup config. If I wanted it to go someplace else, I would have to tell it right here. I'd have to type in where I wanted it to go. All right, so now it built the configuration and we're good. So now if my device gets powered down, at least I'm going to start up with this configuration. If, however, I start typing a new configuration, let's say that I wanted to change my host name to BYU. Okay, so my host name is BYU now. If I get powered down, it's going to start up with the Alexis config because I didn't save anything after I did host name BYU. So this is just in RAM. The host name BYU is in RAM. The router did reflect the name. However, it didn't save it. So if I lose my power, I lose everything. This is another a command that we're going to be doing all of the time. You can do your show start, and the show startup config will show you what is running on your device, what you have saved. And notice that when you do the show startup config, it tells you how many bytes of memory you're using, unlike the show run, which just tells you how big the file size is, but it's not in memory. This is in memory. All right, so this is the basic configuration of your router and your switch. The only difference between what we did today is how we give the router its address. So I'm clicked on the router right now. Unfortunately, both of them had the same name, so we probably should change this name. And notice there are no passwords. I didn't set up the LineCom password, so it let me here automatically without asking me for a password. I did not set up an enable secret or enable password, so it put me directly into that prompt, which is very dangerous because, again, anyone can plug into that port and now configure it. Well, I'm going to change the host name so we're not confused as to which device. So I'm going to be router 1. All right, so we're on the router right now. The only difference now is how we're going to configure the router's port. If you look at the router in the picture, it's the gigabit 000 that has the address. So that's how we give the router its IP addressing. We go into the actual ports, we do IP address, and we already gave this router an address. Let's do it again. 192.168.10.1, and it's a /24, so it's a 255 and 3 octets. 255.255.255.0, and then a no shut to bring that interface up. Okay, it probably was already up, but that's the only difference in the configuration between the switch and the router is how we give the router its address and how we give the switch its address. Remember, for the switch, when we're configuring the switch, that address is being given to the switch by interface VLAN 1. That's how we're giving the overall switch its address. We do not go into the ports on the switch and give them addresses. So on the switch, if we were to do a show IP int brief, it will show us the status of all of the ports. These are all of the fast Ethernet ports that we plug our PCs or a router into on the switch. So we're not going into those ports and giving them an address. We're just giving an address to the overall switch. But with the router, we are going into its ports. So if I did a show IP int brief, it will show us all of the interfaces on the router, and it only has these 2 gigabit interfaces and a VLAN 1. We're not using the VLAN 1, so just disregard that right now. We're using gigabit 00. That's how we connected our router to the switch, with the gigabit 00 to the switch, and we gave it this address, and this address will be the default gateway address for all of the devices on the network. So I hope you learned how to do the basic router configuration, and if you have any questions, let me know.